welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and we have got a lot going on in the Big Ten to talk about. I do apologize, we're starting late because literally like a half hour ago, we had to change a topic in this episode because I got some juicy information from somebody who's pretty plugged in. It's actually kind of their job to be plugged in. And so we're going to talk about that here soon, but we're also going to talk about Sherrone Moore is the new head coach at Michigan. Some people are leaving Michigan, and it could be pretty impactful. So we're going to talk about what could that mean for the Michigan program, what does that mean for the Big Ten overall, and then we're also going to talk about Oregon. Oregon is one of the teams coming in from the Pac-12, and they are coming in hot, right? They had a good offseason. We're going to talk about what's going on there. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about who is the next Big Ten head coach ready to jump from college football to the NFL. But before we get to that, I'm going to introduce our guests, let them tell them about you a little bit, or let them tell them about themselves to you a little bit and where you can find them at. Justin, why don't you start us off?
Yep, and y'all probably seen me on here before. Hope my volume's okay. I sounded kind of loud there. My name is Justin Adams. You can follow me on X at the _H-Town Husker. I've been on here for the month of January, and you can also find me over at Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football, and most recent venture, the Big Ten Show. It's at Big Ten Show on X and YouTube to check out what we got going on over there. So appreciate JR for having me back on and having me on for this month, man. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we're gonna have another guest next month, but we'll continue to bring Justin back on. Justin's valuable to us here, and with his own Big Ten show, we got to make sure we cross paths as much as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. All right, BSul, you want to tell people about you, where they can find you at?
Yeah, I'm BSul, part of the Sully Scoop trio on the podcast. You'll see TSul also on here with me today. You can catch me on X at the real BSul. Love Nebraska football, love talking Big Ten football, and thanks for having us back on, JR.
Of course. TSul, you want to at least tell people about you? They know your podcast, but tell them about you.
Yeah, you guys know I'm with the Sully Scoop here. You can find the Sully Scoop at Sully_Scoop. BSul just mentioned, we're three brothers. We just dive in everything Nebraska football. So
there you go. Awesome. We do want to remind you the Big Ten Huddle is brought to you by Big Banter Sports, BigBanterSports.com. Go there for all your Big Ten media needs. And also please do like and subscribe to the Big Ten Huddle on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast, give us a subscribe or a follow over there. We appreciate it. We're trying to grow this channel. We're trying to grow Big Ten media and just everything overall. So we appreciate any of you that help us do that. All right. So our first topic is Michigan's coaching staff changes. So last week, Jim Harbaugh leaves Michigan. That happened like Wednesday or something like that. It literally looked like it was happening so much that we just went ahead and made our topic, Jim Harbaugh has left. Because I knew. I was like, I'm going to make this video, and literally the next day he's going to leave. So we just went ahead and did that. Well, then later that week, right before the weekend, Sherrone Moore accepts the job. News comes out, Jesse Minter is leaving, Jay Harbaugh is leaving, and then the Monday morning news that kind of riled people up, rattled some feathers, is that Ben Herbert, the strength and conditioning coach, is also leaving to go to the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh. Now, there's been a lot of speculation. Whose fault is this? Is it, Jim Harbaugh's fault? Is this Ward Manuel's fault? Is Ben Herbert just have a dream to do strength and conditioning in the NFL? Who knows? Is it nobody's fault? And it's just kind of what happens. Who knows? If the guys want to speculate on whose fault it is, we can do that. I don't really think any of us have insider info on that, so I don't know how valuable it is. But I do want to start off with this question. Out of those coaches who have left, and if there is another coach you believe might leave, who do you think would be the most impactful or has been the most impactful loss for Michigan so far? Justin, why don't you start us off?
Well, it depends on which angle you look at it because, Jim Harbaugh, of course, leaving was expected, right? Probably by staff, players alike. Losing oh my God, why am I drawing a blank? Minter was pretty much a done deal. Like that almost seemed like a package deal when Harbaugh was gone, that Minter would be gone as well. I think in terms of just the magnitude of the move and the shock of the move, I think Ben Herbert's loss is going to be more impactful because we've seen the players on Twitter already kind of being a little bit vocal about how they felt about it overall, and not really in a good way. Even Alex Orji posted, a forget what exactly
Man, or
posted,
something
like a
like
sad
that.
face or something like that. Yeah. So I saw something about all the posts and seen them. So I think that just in terms of it potentially causing a friction in the locker room and players potentially choosing to leave. Because I think when they hired Sharon Moore, that was the best possible move that they could have made for the short term, just to keep that keep that locker room the way it was, keep those players in house with a staff that they trust. So it'll be curious to see if they can land somebody in there that can help them keep some of these guys. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because it seemed like he was very, very well liked within that locker room with those players and staff. So yeah, just in that regard. But it's got to be, overall, it's got to be Harbaugh is the biggest loss, of course.
Yeah, no, I think Harbaugh is definitely the biggest one, and anybody he takes with him kind of just adds to that, right?
Yeah.
BSul, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Justin hit the nail on the head there. I honestly think when you start to look at it, I think in the long run here, probably the biggest loss for Michigan is going to be Ben Herbert. Last 3 years, what you can point to and look at this Michigan team, their strength and conditioning has really taken them to that next step to allow them to really kind of enforce their will, especially last year when you saw them playing in the Big Ten against a majority of the teams there. They were hands down the best team in the trenches, which is where you need to win. And so Ben Herbert leaving, that's definitely going to hurt. It does beg the question, though, because I agree with Justin where losing Jim Harbaugh is obviously the most impactful because you're losing the head of your program. But it does make you wonder with the Sharon Moore hire, is this more of and I'm just going to draw two comparisons here. Is this more of a David Shaw hire where when Jim Harbaugh left Stanford, Shaw stepped in and actually ran the program relatively successful for a handful of years there? Or is this going to be one of those where he's kind of bridging the gap and trying to get the last bit of success out of the program before it kind of falls down and they want to change ways, kind of like the way Nebraska did with Frank Solich when they decided to end up pulling the plug on him and probably a little premature, and that started really our downfall there.
Yeah, no, there are definitely similarities to other things. I have a similarity I have thoughts on, but I'll let TSul go first. TSul, what are your thoughts?
Well, Michigan fans, you better plug your ears here because here's what I'm going to tell you. The biggest loss for Michigan is Connor Stallions. All right. Look, Jim Harbaugh didn't win anything without that guy. He's unproven at Michigan without stealing people's playbooks. Would they have won the Big Ten? Probably. But would they have ran away with it the way that they did? I don't think so.
Whoa.
And he left to the NFL before we could even find out because either he thought the NCAA was going to drop the hammer or maybe he just thinks that maybe they were better than what they should have been.
I feel
or
go ahead, Justin. What were you saying?
I said you're smiling ear to ear hearing that.
I am. I'm gonna have to do something I hate to do, but as the host of the show, I do feel like it needs to be said. They did win the national championship without Connor
After
Stallions.
The damage was done, though.
They're very good.
Yeah. I can only
they're good.
I think they were the best regardless.
You just don't know. It's a whole season, you know? If
Maybe
they win one game, Florida State's in.
Maybe because I'm an Astros fan, I'm a little bit more
understanding.
Some sympathy. No, I think that there are some issues here with Michigan, but I also think that they made the right move, which was hiring Sharon Moore. I mean, we talked a little bit about David Shaw and the how he was able to kind of keep things going for a little while, and I think Sharon Moore has the ability to do that, but I also think Sharon Moore seems like he has the charisma, and he seems like he fits Michigan well enough that they will be able to continue to be, they're not going to turn into Rich Rod days or anything like that, but they can, be a good team who can contend for the Big Ten. from time to time, like they were with Harbaugh. I mean, there were years where Michigan would have won the Big Ten if they had just beat Ohio State, and I could see that happening where a game between Ohio State and Michigan could decide who goes to the Big Ten championship. So definitely some thoughts there. But the thing that I'm going to compare this to, and I actually was talking to somebody with it on Twitter, is Pete Carroll at USC. Somebody was telling me, they were like, what Jim Harbaugh is doing is what every coach does who left. And I said, okay, tell me the last coach who won the national championship relatively close to when they left, went to the NFL, and took most of the staff with them. Who was the last one to do that? And they were like, well, it's such a small list. That was Pete Carroll, and that's the only one who it's like. And I was like, exactly. Yep. Do you really want Michigan to be like USC after Pete Carroll left? Because that's what it's setting up to do.
Yeah.
And so, again, I'm not trying to be a hater here and say, because obviously I have this logo next to me. Everybody's going to say, JR, you're a hater. Sure, it's fine. But if I'm looking at this and saying, what has history told us, it's that this is not going to go well. Now, it could still go well. I'll give Sherrone Moore his props. But it certainly could not go well. And the other piece of that is a part of it now that wasn't back then with Pete Carroll is that players can leave. And so, BSul, my question to you is, we've seen one player leave, right? We saw the Reese Atterbury today leave for the transfer portal. He could still technically come back, but he's a backup defensive lineman. Do we see more guys from Michigan leave in this 30-window period when the portal is open for them?
I think we absolutely do. I think, and I'm trying to think of the right way here, I think with the coaching staff still kind of being ironed out right now, this Michigan team, they might be waiting to see where the chips fall and where they lay. Maybe I'm trying to think of the third string running back, but for example, I'll use Ernest Hausman. Yeah, but so I'll use a guy that at least Justin, TSul, and I are familiar with. Ernest Hausman.
Come on back, Ernest.
Yeah.
So he, left, went there, found a program that really wanted to use him. They used him in more of a reserve role, but he kind of stepped up towards the end of the season. Is there somebody on that staff that he was connected with who is now no longer going to be there with Sherrone Moore? And that's going to lead to him deciding to leave. And I don't think those chips are going to fall until closer to that 30-day window ending, that most of the players are going to have these conversations between their family, between Sherrone Moore, and then also between the coaches who were their lifeline to the program.
Yeah, that's a great point. TSul, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with BSul here. I mean, there's no doubt there's going to be a lot of guys enter the portal. I mean, you see it every time a coach gets fired, a coach gets hired, places they change. A lot of people, leave their program. Even if no change happens, people leave. So I expect, a lot of people to submit their names.
Justin, is there any way Michigan could end up like Arizona, where some of their best players did stay? I'm thinking of the Fafita quarterback and the wide receiver. I can't remember what his name was, but they stayed even through the Jed Fish coaching change. Is there any possible way we see all of Johnson, Loveland, Graham, Mason, all of them stay?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of more of a middle of the road type of deal, because one of the biggest things that we pointed to when Sherrone Moore was hired was the fact that it was going to be the short-term best move in terms of retaining a lot of the talent they had. I think Sherrone Moore has built enough relationships there that he is going to retain a good majority of those players. I do think there are going to be departures. I think the Ben Herbert news actually may springboard a couple of those as well. Maybe a couple of the players that were holding out, to see if, not only Harbaugh was going to leave, but if Mentor left. There's a lot of different things here, but I think overall damage control wise, this was the best move they could have made to retain their talent. I still hold firm in that. And to your point about the USC thing too, just to counter that a little bit too, it's also like, if it happened 10 times, 9 out of 10, but happened one time doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen again. And so I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle of those things. I don't think it's going to be as extreme as we would normally see with the coaching change, but in the modern world of the transfer portal, NIL, we're going to see some flux. We're probably going to see a couple of the high-level guys go. But I don't think it's going to be that bad. We also see Sharon Moore over the course of this season, the passion that he has for that university, the love that he has for these players, the emotion that he shows. I don't think it could be understated how big and important that is to those players to see the authenticity of that coach and know that he actually genuinely cares about them. I do think that's going to go a long way. So I think there's a lot of factors into that, but they are going to, they're going to lose some guys, just the nature of the beast, but I don't think it'll be too terribly bad in comparison to other things we've seen. Washington, they're going through it badly. So
yeah, I think so too. A lot of what you said, I agree with. I wonder how much these players are waiting until, they see what kind of sanctions come down, right?
Yeah.
Because, listen, even Michigan media is saying there will be sanctions. Now, Michigan media disagrees and says that, it's just going to be a few scholarships, maybe a big fine. That's not what I've heard personally. It's personally going to be bigger, but, for all I know, I could be wrong. So we'll see, what it is. I'm not going to sit here and say that, this is definitely happening and expect the worst. However, there is a possibility of there being some kind of bowl ban. There is a possibility of there being, a large scholarship reduction that could prevent players from feeling like they have a future there. All those things are possible. And if those things do happen, I'm wondering if that's when we start to see some of these players, go through an exodus of the team. And I think Michigan fans would understand. Not to say they would be happy with it,
right.
But kind of like Jim Harbaugh leaving. Like, they understood. He wants to go to the NFL. He wants to win there. If sanctions come down and there is a bowl ban, I think Michigan fans would understand and say, we get it, Kenneth Grant. You're going to Texas, and you want to go win something. Not that you didn't already win something, but win something more. So that's when I feel like this is more likely to happen because, like I said, Sharon Moore was the right hire, if nothing else, than to keep these guys intact. Before we move on to the next question, we have the Ohio podcast joining us. What's up, Sullies? At least we agree on Harbaugh. So you guys have found some common ground. They also said they can all leave as far as I'm concerned, as long as they don't come to Ohio State. Yeah, we were having a debate on that in the last Ohio podcast. So my final question is about expectations for Oregon. We'll talk about them in a second. But expectations for Michigan coming into 2024. I was very vocal in saying if Jim Harbaugh stays, Michigan is still my favorite to win the Big Ten. They've won it the past 3 years. I don't really think you can knock them off, even with those seniors leaving and stuff. Those seniors left in 2021, and they still came back in 2022 and won it all in the Big Ten. So, but I do think that Jim Harbaugh leaving, Jesse Minter leaving, Ben Herbert as well, is affecting my expectations. So I feel like for me personally, I probably have them third or fourth in the Big Ten right now. TSul, how has the coaching changes affected your expectations for them?
Definitely affected them. I could see Michigan going 9-3, 10-2. I think that's realistic for them. I think if they get worse, 8 wins or less, they should be mad. But, that's what I think.
Yeah. What do you think, Justin?
So I actually had this conversation a couple days ago on their schedule. It's a little difficult. However, I could very well, I said the other day, 10-2 is reasonable. Other people were saying, because they do, I believe they have Oregon. I'm trying to remember who else. They have about 4, really difficult games, but I had them splitting those 2-2. I think 10-2 is very reasonable. I don't think fans would scoff at 9-3 just based on that schedule. 8 wins would be pushing it. So I'm going to go just conservatively. I'll say 9-3. And, but it gets very dicey at points in that schedule. And there's, it's not going to take much more news for this to completely just be a landslide of players exiting. So they just got to keep it very, everything where it's at right now and try not to lose any more coaches or anything like that if they want to stick to that.
Keep it intact.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this really fast, Justin. What is more likely for Michigan, 11 wins or 8 wins?
More likely, oh man, that's tough. I would probably have to say 8. Just
8.
only because right now the most recent news we had is not good for the university. If we were coming off of maybe, losing Ben Herbert is not great. If we were coming off of maybe a little bit more of a positive news and the players weren't reacting with negative stuff on Twitter, maybe I'd decide more for 11. But this is just assuming that maybe some things may happen between now and then that aren't for the better, because that seems to be the trend right now in Michigan. It's damage control at this point. So.
Yeah, win the national championship. What did it cost you? Everything.
Yeah,
but
right.
hey, it sounds like they're okay with it. And honestly, I'd be okay with it too if my team won the national championship. That's what you want. That's what you play for. BSul, how have your expectations changed?
I definitely thought even if Jim Harbaugh didn't leave, it would have been the same thing that you said, JR. It's hard to knock somebody off when they're at the top of the mountain until somebody does it. But when you look, like Justin said, when you look at this schedule, I mean, it's very realistic that Michigan could lose their first game of the season in September. They play Texas second week of the season. One of the best things that happened to them was they're away at Washington, but Washington's program's in disarray right now after Kalen left. But then you still got Oregon, you've got Ohio State. So I do think that 8 wins is more realistic than 11, like Justin said. But I do think that 9-3 is kind of that sweet spot for them. There's still a lot of games that even if Michigan loses a handful of talent, are we talking talent that hasn't really stepped up yet? That are we talking guys that are, sophomores and freshmen that aren't necessarily playing, they're playing more reserve roles, that the seniors will still, as long as they're not banned from bowl games this coming year, are the seniors going to stick it out for one more year and see, what they can do? Do they still have an opportunity to, become some of the most winningest players in Michigan history?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I think, we could totally see ourselves in a situation just because of how difficult the schedule is. I'm not saying that Michigan will be bad next year by any means, but just based off how the schedule is, I could totally see, an 8-3 team, or what would that be? 8-4 team, 8-3, something like that. An 8-3 team going in facing Ohio State last game of the season, and those players just basically saying, this is all our season means right now.
Yeah.
Beating this team. Yes, there will only be 9 wins, but guess what? In Sherrod Moore's first year as head coach, if we get him a second win over Ohio State, that's what the season can be defined by, and it'll be okay.
Do you mind if I add something to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's think about it this way. Listen to that schedule. What's more likely? Is it more likely they're going to only lose to one of those more difficult teams, or is it more likely there's a chance that they may just have a couple hiccups on some tough road games and drop to 8 wins? Because at the end of the day, 10-2, it's only one more win to 11. It's a couple more losses to 8. However, if you look at it like that, I think it's just the odds are really stacked against them that with this tough of a schedule that they're going to be able to go in there and beat all but one of those teams. That would be a Sherrod Moore better immediately get an extension if he's able to come out and do that. So,
and Justin, kind of looking at that too. And I'll leave it after this, JR. But when you look at their first 4 games, I mean, and everybody loves opening up against a couple teams that, even though Fresno State's no slouch there, you like opening against the weaker opponents. Yeah. But they go from Fresno State to Texas to Arkansas State to USC, and as much as USC had a down year last year, they're still a pretty good team with a decent amount of talent there. That is it realistic that Michigan opens up the season 2-2 and they have all of a sudden, okay, we have Minnesota coming to town. This is our get right, and we need to, play for the rest of the season come week 5.
Yep. Now, BSul, what's more likely here? Michigan getting 8 wins or less, or USC missing a bowl game? Have you taken a look at USC's schedule this year? Because it's ridiculous.
I mean, I would say Michigan, or I would say USC missing a bowl game is probably more realistic, just because, I mean, the teams coming to a new conference, they're going to have to learn how to win in the cold and in the winter of the Midwest. So it wouldn't surprise me if USC has more hiccups than Michigan does.
And I got to tell you, it feels nice to finally see a team who got a worse schedule than Nebraska. It finally happened. Because USC, I mean, they don't give them back-to-back home games. The only back-to-back home games is before the Big Ten schedule opens, and then their AD went added on and scheduled Notre Dame and LSU.
Yeah.
Like, what is that guy doing?
Yeah. Not setting them up for success, that's for sure.
No.
Well, and I think some of this, ADs were scheduling stuff, and they didn't realize what the Big Ten expansion
These are
would
scheduled
be.
way so far in advance, but yeah, it's real rough.
I mean, there's a reason why the Big Ten is talking right now about going to 10 conference games and playing 0 Power 5 out of conference.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally in the discussion right now. If people haven't seen, like, the Big Ten is saying, let's just play 10 conference games, no SEC, no Big 12, no ACC, like none of that. We're just going to play group of 5 schools in the out of conference, and then, because Big Ten is not scared to play each other like a certain conference down south is. Okay, moving on. Let's go from there, right? That's a great end point. Our next piece to talk about here is Oregon's offseason and Big Ten expectations. So Oregon right now has the number 3 transfer portal class. They have the number 5 overall recruiting and transfer portal combined class in all of college football. They have lost a couple of one coach. I'm trying to find it here. I just had it up. I apologize. There we go. They did lose Demetrius Martin, their cornerbacks coach, but they did bring in, I think his name is Chris Hampton, to be his replacement. However, we don't see very much turnover on Oregon. So Oregon had a good year last year. Not very much turnover on their coaching staff, but they have added a number of good transfers. Jabari Muhammad from Washington is coming in there. Cam Alexander, a cornerback, is coming in there. Evan Stewart, 5-star in the transfer portal, was a really, really good wide receiver for Texas A&M. There's just a lot of good players coming in to Oregon now this year, and we could see Oregon coming in and fighting for the Big Ten championship right away. TSul, we'll start with you. What has been Oregon's most impressive move, whether it be player, coach, whatever it might be? What's been their most impressive move to you so far this offseason?
It's got to be joining the conference of the Big Ten. I mean, let's be serious. The Pac-12 was not a legit conference. They're going to be taken a lot more serious in the Big Ten. And so coming out as a 10-win team in the Big Ten, you're going to have a lot more respect than coming out as a 10-win team in the Pac-12. That's what it is for me. But they got to be ready for the knit and grit of the tough teams, because, you look at your schedule, you might be playing Minnesota and say, hey, that's not a tough game. Well, guess what? They're going to play it tough, so you better be ready.
Big Ten tough. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, it's got to be. So you talked about the turnover at the cornerback coach position, but it's the cornerbacks in general, specifically Jabbar Muhammad, because that was not only their biggest issue coming into the 2023 season was their pass defense, but it was also their biggest issue in 2020. It was 2022 and then 2023. Now, it did improve, coming into the 2023 season, it was the biggest concern, and they were previously 110th in terms of pass defense. Overall, defensively this past year, they were 11th in scoring, 11th in run defense, but 63rd in pass defense. And so they had some turnover there. Last year, they had brought in Tysheem Johnson, who was added from Ole Miss the season before. He will be returning, and then they Evan Williams, who they also added before the 23 season, he's out, but they got, like I said, Jabbar Muhammad, Cam Alexander, who's going to come in and probably replace Jaleel Florence, who's dealing with a offseason knee injury. So he'll probably come down there and be able to. He'll probably play safety, and then you have I'm drawing a blank on his name. Box safety, Brandon Johnson from Duke. He's probably going to come and be either a box safety style of guy. But I think they've done a really, really good job, especially the Jabbar Muhammad. That was so huge for them in that defensive backfield, especially with Jaleel Florence being out and that secondary being a little bit hamstrung. But yeah, this is going to be massive for them. That's the one thing that they really need to get better to make this team complete, and they addressed it. So,
especially from a rival like Washington, right?
Yeah.
Getting a guy like that. We just had Eric from the Ohio podcast saying he doesn't want any rival players, but in this situation, that was what Oregon needed, and
got to do it. Yeah,
it has to make their rival sting a little bit.
Yep.
You got their players, so
exactly.
BSul, what has you've been your favorite addition for Oregon so far this offseason?
I mean, I agree. They addressed a lot of needs that they had, but Oregon's biggest loss this season or this offseason is, aside from the potential of Daniel Lanning leaving, and they're counting their blessings that he didn't, but it's the fact that Bo Nix is gone after 2 stellar years there, and they replaced Bo Nix and with Dillon Gabriel, who's coming in with a ton of experience, a ton of success at the college football level. And he's a guy who, again, probably not as accurate as Bo Nix, but when Bo Nix transferred out of Auburn, he wasn't the most accurate quarterback either. So it comes down to, can Oregon put Dillon Gabriel in a position to be successful like Bo Nix was? And how much of a drop-off does that offense have going from Nix to Gabriel? Because I don't think it's going to be that big a drop-off. And especially when you start looking at that Oregon schedule to start the season, you're talking they go Hawaii, Idaho, Boise State. 3 games to really give Dillon Gabriel enough time to get right, get his head in the game. And then you've got, your in-state rival Oregon State all before you start Big Ten play. So Dillon Gabriel has that opportunity to win over the fan base there and show them, hey, Bo may be gone, but I've still got this team clicking on all cylinders.
I was told by some Oregon people that apparently that Hawaii game was canceled for some reason. So I don't know what the deal with that was, but so they're not playing Hawaii apparently, according to Oregon Twitter. But I agree. What'd you say? Idaho, and who was the other one?
Idaho, Boise State, and then Oregon State after. And Oregon State just lost DJ as well. So
right. Who's going to be a tougher opponent, Boise State or Oregon State? I mean, I know Oregon State fans are like yelling at their computer having me ask that, but
I would still have to
Jonathan
go with
Smith,
Oregon State, maybe. Just I think maybe they just have a higher quality of talent recruited to that team just because, they're Oregon State, it's Boise State.
Maybe.
Statue of Liberty is their only moment. Being completely honest.
And it was a moment.
Looking at it,
I think for me personally, it's along the same lines as you, BSul. Bo Nix, I think, was much, much more important to this Oregon team than I think some people realize. And bringing in a veteran like Dillon Gabriel for that is huge. The wide receiver, Evan Stewart, to combine with Gabriel, I think is also another huge addition. And I've been high on him this entire time. I understand not everybody else is as excited about him because of how his first year in college went. But I think Dante Moore to Oregon is a really, really good pickup. Unless something happens with the NCAA rules, he's not going to be able to transfer unless he graduates. So they have their new quarterback after Dillon Gabriel locked in there. He can't say, oh, this isn't for me or whatever else and transfer out. They could bring in another transfer quarterback next offseason and say, hey, you two battle it out and let's see who the best player is, Dante Moore or, whoever this other guy is. So I think it's a good move. I think that Oregon has set themselves up. They've kind of given themselves this identity that, hey, if you're a transfer quarterback, come to Oregon, we'll turn you into a 1st or 2nd round pick with Bo Nix. And if they can do the same thing with Dillon Gabriel, they're only going to improve that stock and make themselves a more desirable place for quarterbacks at struggling programs to come and excel there. All right, Justin, we'll move on to the next question with this. Your expectations for Oregon coming into the Big Ten. I think everybody kind of feels like Washington's going to be a little down. They've lost some guys. USC's a bit of a question mark without Caleb Williams. We know they're going to have a good offense. What's the new defensive coordinator going to do? People are kind of down on UCLA. But Oregon seems to be the best team coming into the conference right now. Justin, what are your expectations for them in 2024?
Yeah, I definitely, naturally, probably everybody's going to say that they're the best team coming in now. I firmly believe that they are not in a position yet. So here's my thing on the whole conference movement, Pac-12 to Big Ten. I may have told you this before, and I've said this numerous times. But if we're using the national championship game as a gauge of what the top of each conference looks like and which conference is going to have to adjust more to the other, I don't necessarily think the Pac-12 teams are built for this battle of attrition that is the game in the trenches, that is the Big Ten football. I think they even in, if you use a one-off example of them playing a Big Ten team, the grind of the season and being in here with these dog fights with your Michigans, your Iowas, and all that takes a toll. That causes, that wears a team down. They're used to this spread it out style of Pac-12 football where it's more so getting guys into space, and you don't have the same wear and tear on your body in the battle of attrition over the course of the season. I think that's going to impact them. I don't think they're going to win the Big Ten, nor do I think they're going to be in a position to win the Big Ten when this season's over. But I can see them finishing, top three. I'll probably say top three. I'll go top three. I'll give them that. But I just think there's going to be a bigger of adjustment than a lot of people think with some of these teams. And I think in the beginning, it's going to be a little bit tougher than they think coming in. Maybe they'll drop a game or two that they shouldn't. But that's my take on it overall. I think they will be very good for the conference long term. But I just think there's some size that these teams are going to have to build up a little bit, and some adjustments that are going to have to be made to the style.
Would you say that of all the Pac-12 teams, and I'm just pushing back a little bit here for conversation, wouldn't you say that the best situation of those four teams is Oregon, though?
Yep, exactly. And so that's why, I can't really say, that's the only reason why I can't really put them past three, but I can't also pick them to win at year one. I think three is about a reasonable spot for them to finish in if everything goes the way that I think it might.
Yeah. Your thoughts, BSul, on the expectations of Oregon going into 2024?
Yeah, I think Justin hit again was pretty spot on with that. Speaking from experience and coming from the Big 12 to the Big 10 was different for Nebraska. Just like Oregon coming from the Pac-12 to the Big 10, it's going to be different for them. I'm not trying to say it's going to be the exact same adjustment there, but coming from the Big 12, and again, when you watch that year one, Nebraska the first year was kind of able to, I'll say, make some of the Big Ten teams adjust to them a little bit, but then they learned very quickly, if you're not winning the trenches, you're not going to be winning in the Big Ten, especially come, end of October, November, December. And so when you look at it that way for this Oregon team, I think probably that 3 to 4, top 3, top 4 team in the Big Ten is realistic there. But as much as this pains me to say it, is their tough, they have Ohio State at home in Eugene, and then they go from that game, which Ohio State's going to be a dogfight for them, to on the road at Purdue, end of October, which very realistically, that has an opportunity to be, there could be snow, it could be brutally cold, it could be stupidly hot. It's so hard to say, and Purdue's not necessarily the best team.
When is their bye week? Just while you're looking.
They are.
That's because that's a curious to know where that comes at in the season. What point?
They got a bye week after Wisconsin, which is the second to last of the season.
Very end.
But I think there's 2 bye weeks this year.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
They got one after Oregon State too.
Yeah, so early it's right before Big Ten play and at the end.
Not helpful.
I didn't do them any favors either.
No, but I could just see that, as much as Purdue's usually a trap game for some teams, if that is your first true road game in the Big Ten, it's October in West Lafayette. There's an opportunity there that's where Oregon's going to stumble, and that's where their season could really get put on the ropes.
Yeah, I'm doing some quick math here on Nebraska entering the Big Ten their first season. So, TSul, you go ahead and give your expectations while I finish this up.
Well, I definitely think Oregon's good enough to compete for the Big Ten, but I think they're just going to run out of steam. I mean, realistically, that Ohio State game, I think, is going to be deflating for them. I could see them being undefeated heading into that Ohio State game, and after that, I could see them losing, all but 2 of their games to end the season. I mean, I think November's going to kill them. You're talking at Michigan, home against Maryland, at Wisconsin, home against Washington. That's pretty tough November.
Yeah,
let's
so
remember Scott Frost too. Was saying that the Big Ten was going to have to adjust to his offense, and it did not have to.
Yeah.
So,
but I got Oregon finishing. I'm not even ready to sell the ship yet on Washington. I still think Washington's going to be better than them at the end of the season, and I don't think that necessarily they're going to be better than Penn State or maybe even Wisconsin. I'm not sure. Maybe Nebraska. If Raiola shows up this year.
Raiola's going to be wheeling and dealing all over him.
Oh, you betcha.
I do think I probably am going to favor Oregon over Washington, but I also did that twice last year, and look how that went out for me. So I thought they were going to beat them twice, both times last year.
Yeah, I stopped betting for a reason.
Yeah.
I was betting too much on Nebraska.
Same.
So in 2011, Nebraska's first 7 games, which they lost one of those, but they went 6-1 in their first 7 games, they scored an average of 37.5 points per game, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
In their last 5, which they lost, how many of those? Because they went 9-4. In their last 5, not including the bowl game. I guess if you included the bowl game, it would be even worse, though. So, but in their last 5, they went 3-2, and they went 20.6 points per game.
Yeah.
So the running out of steam, at least for the offense here that you guys are talking about, definitely can hit. My biggest thing is I'm wondering if Oregon is going to be more affected by the possibility of recruiting changes and how they're going to have to adjust to that, being in the Big Ten, because anytime you join a new conference, there's recruiting changes there. All of you guys can attest to that. And it's like maybe this is going to be their best year as they adjust to that. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I think that recruiting
it looks like an Oregon fan. Let me do this really fast, Justin.
Oh,
it looks like we have an Oregon fan who's upset with us. This is hilarious. Last year's pack schedule was harder.
Dude's delusional.
Than this year's.
They're all
big.
mad.
I do think that the pack schedule, top end, was more difficult than some Big Ten schedules. But I still think at the end of the day.
But it's not about that. It's about the overall, the snowball effect of the grind of the cold and the Big Ten schools and the way Big Ten football is just winning the battle of the trenches. It's just hard-nosed physical football. Even Rutgers, they're one of the most physical teams. They're probably the most physical team out of the Pac-12 teams, Rutgers.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not counting Oregon out by any means. I think you guys are a bit lower than them I personally am. But I definitely see where you guys are coming from. Like I said, with coming to the end of the season, holding up and stuff like that. Because let's be honest, November is a grind for everybody. That's the reason why the SEC has gotten rid of one of their conference games, so that way they can play a cupcake, whatever. But that's one of the reasons why they do that, is because November is a grind for everybody, and it is true that coming into the Big Ten, you're going to have the grind of the cold in a lot of areas, but let's also not act like Oregon doesn't deal with the cold. They're cold up there.
Right, but that's why we specifically were talking about a little bit more of the other stuff on top of that.
Right. I think also with that being said, as much as I think the offense will be affected by the tone of the game and how Big Ten football teams dictate how the game script goes, I think it's more going to affect the Oregon defense in the long run. That come the fourth quarter, especially you're talking your, let's call it your 4th, 5th Big Ten game in a row, where you're playing these teams who line up and want to run the ball at you in the trenches, up the middle, in between the tackles, the entire game. And they're used to having teams who want to spread you out and play in space, that your offensive line or your defensive line is not going to be built to sustain that in the long run. That again, I keep going back to that Purdue game, and I hate trying to call that as an upset of the year right there, but I think that's going to be a game Purdue is going to try and run the ball, dictate, control the clock, take as many opportunities away from Oregon as they can, and by that fourth quarter, again, Oregon coming off a long game they've got Michigan State, then Ohio State back to back, and then they go on the road to Purdue. At that point, you're talking that's quarter number 12 of Big Ten football, that how does their defensive line react to being just ran at the entire game?
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. So I know any Oregon fan watching this, you have probably either pulled your hair out or turned it off by now, and that's totally fine. We get that. The only thing I would argue is that we have 3 guys who have all seen what happens when you join a new conference.
Yeah.
And we'll all admit that
It's
there
tough.
are different styles to different conferences, and they do change, and they do
tough.
affect you. So I think Oregon is a very talented team. I think that, like I said, when we were talking beforehand, they're still my second favorite currently to win the Big Ten. But if, like you guys were saying, if they start struggling toward the end of the year, whether that be defense or offense, it would not necessarily surprise me because, like I said, it's November. It's cold. Yeah. It's tough to play in. And it's the grind of trying to make it to the playoffs.
And there's a little bit of pressure on these teams innately to prove themselves as the teams coming into the new conference too. So how do they handle that pressure?
Right.
If they do slip a game here that they shouldn't, and the narrative starts to flip, do they panic? There's a lot of angles to this, a lot of nuance to it. So,
yeah. Needless to say, Oregon has the opportunity though to come into this conference and just receive all bragging rights.
Just win. Shut us up.
If they come in and they win this conference, guys, we have nothing to talk about.
I'm a man of reason, dude.
Yeah.
I will praise them if they come in and do that. I'll be like, I was wrong, dude.
Yeah. And we'll say Oregon's the one. But like I said, if any of these 4 teams coming in have the chance to do it, it's Oregon, because I think Dan Lanning has focused on that defensive line, and he has focused on the line of scrimmage more than some other of those 4 teams coming in have done. So we'll see what goes on with Oregon in the future. All right, moving on to our last part. Second last part, Big Ten expansion rumors. So one of the reasons why we started the show late is because I received information that, and it's kind of public, some people know about it, but the North Carolina had a board of trustees meeting last night. So Monday night, they had a board of trustees meeting, and one of the conversation pieces on the docket was to talk about conference expansion. They went out of the ACC, and the conference that they want to go to is the Big Ten. No shock there, right? There's been plenty of rumors swirling on about that, and what the holdup was that I heard, and I don't have much more information than this, but what I have heard is that the thing holding them up is that North Carolina wants NC State to come with them to the Big Ten, kind of like a USC UCLA situation, to where they're rivals, but they're in the same state, and they kind of want to figure this out together. But the Big Ten is saying no. The Big Ten says no. We do not want NC State. They don't bring enough value. They're from the same state as you, and so we're not going to receive as many benefits of some of the TV revenue and things like that. And so there is a bit of a stand still here, but currently the way it's projected out, the Big Ten wants to accept North Carolina and Florida State together. BSul, I don't have any questions. What are your thoughts?
I'm JR. I'm gonna throw it back to an episode of the Scoop back that we had done previous right before the Big Ten accepted a handful of the 4 Pac-12 teams. When all the speculation came out. And one thing that I pointed to then, and I'm going to bring it up now, the one thing that our conference can say that nobody else can is we are coast to coast. We are nationwide. And so the only real part that we are missing is that Florida and kind of that Southeast dynamic there. So for the Big Ten to sit here, and let's say, again, we're ready to accept North Carolina and Florida State. Florida State's probably itching to take this opportunity. North Carolina says, well, wait a second. We don't want to leave our little brother here. Well, at the end of the day, the Big Ten's going to, nix North Carolina to the side. There's other teams in this conference that will meet the metrics that the Big Ten wants to bring over. If our goal is 2 more, why not nix North Carolina, bring Florida State, and, who do we go to then? Is it a Clemson? Is it, a Miami? Or do we go the other route and try and get Notre Dame out of their basketball contract with the ACC and pull them in because they fit right in the middle of what the Big Ten wants to be anyway?
Yeah, no, those are good thoughts. TSul, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm personally the guy. I think take them all. Just become the NCAA at this point. I mean, just take everybody, throw them in the bucket, and you'll beat the SEC just based on that way. But the way I see it, North Carolina, sure, yeah, come on. Hey, does Clemson want to come? Yeah, I'm cool with that. Boston College, you too? Florida State, Miami? Why not? Take them all. I don't care. It's more money.
It's the academic requirements, TSul. You know, the
What are those?
Clemson's not smart enough. At least that's what I've heard. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I do like TSul's their reverse Pangea, where it's just like everybody comes together and it's just the Big Ten now. But that to BSul's point, getting a footprint even down in the South and Southeast, we saw when Nebraska kind of went away from the Big 12, they lost Texas as a pipeline state, just because of the nature of being in the Big 12 conference, ties to the Tex. If we get ties down to those southern states, Florida being a big one for talent too, that opens up a potential pipeline there for recruiting for the rest of the Big Ten conference goes. So there's just a little silver lining potentially there with that switch. But in general, yeah, I mean, at this point, it's an arms race, right? So if you can get them to meet your whatever academic requirements you have, because at the end of the day, the Big Ten, what they pride themselves on is prestige. And I think that's why in the world of the SEC kind of dominating the college football world, the Big Ten has still been able to be kind of the gold standard as far as just overall across the board. Like the Big Ten is I feel like the more prestigious in terms of just everything. And so if they meet the academic requirements and they are big schools like this, I say even more the reason to bring them in, because at this point, what does it become? It's become bragging rights between the SEC and the Big Ten. It's just become, we have this many blue bloods. We have this many blue bloods. We have this schools that make this much money. We have this schools that make this much money. And all of these are going to help us on the TV deals in the future and all of that. So I say if they can get a big school in to meet their academic requirements, bring them in. But yeah, the in North Carolina trying to be like, we want NC State in here. Like, you don't have the leverage here. Like, you need us more than we need you. So you could figure that out and get back to us. But so on that, if they're going to play hard to get with that, yeah, go get Florida State and then dive in and get somebody else. I don't want Clemson though, because I don't want to listen to Dabo, ramble on for 20 minutes about NIL every time he talks. But yeah, Notre Dame would be a great one.
It feels like to me, like, when we were younger and we would go play our baseball games and stuff like that, and mom and dad would take us, and maybe you asked before the game or after the game, like, can we go get ice cream afterward? Like,
yep.
And mom and dad were like, no, that's not happening.
Yep.
Like, it's cute you asked, but no, that's not happening.
Yep.
It feels like North Carolina asking the Big Ten, like, can we get ice cream afterward with our friend NC State? And
yeah, no, you're grounded. Go back home.
Like I said, it's cute you asked, but no. I see what you're saying, TSul, and part of me agrees with that. But the other part of me, I do like this like prestigious element, and maybe it's just like the snotty person in me, I guess. I don't know, but I kind of like this prestigious element where it's like we're just gonna choose the people that we think are best. Because like the Big 12 down there, they're gobbling up anybody they can. They're like, oh, Utah, you want to come in? Sure. Arizona, you want to come in? Sure. Like anybody, yes, please come join us because we want to stay alive, and we're gonna try to get as many people as possible.
I think that's what helped the Big Ten when they were negotiating TV deals and why they ended up with a better one.
Right.
Yes.
Because they went through and they said, who are good brands to bring in? USC, good brand. UCLA, good brand. For as much as the crap talking we just did about Oregon a little bit, Oregon, good brand. I think Oregon's probably the best addition out of anybody. USC obviously has the bigger TV market, bigger area and stuff. But the one I'm most excited about getting is Oregon, because I feel like they bring the most kind of cachet and prestige and stuff like that into the conference with them. And then, of course, Washington, too. The timing of it, them just going to the national championship. I loved it. I loved saying it was an all Big Ten national championship.
Yeah.
Because it is. I mean, this team is literally going to be in the Big Ten next year. And, anything I can do to kind of rub it in the SEC's face a little bit, I'm good with that.
It's the thing about that the Pac-12, I think, and like Oregon is bringing to the Big Ten. Like, you don't have a ton of blue bloods over there, right? You got USC. That's it.
Yeah.
So they're bringing a little bit of flash and, that type of stuff. Oregon is, of course, they had their uniforms and stuff like that, and they've been good, but they haven't gotten over the hump, And so maybe this pairing is what they need to kind of get over the hump, But I think it's another one of those things where it's just like, you look at it and you have the blue bloods and the established these programs over here, and then you have these up and coming coaches and these universities that have a lot of backing, a lot of fan base, a lot of resources, and they're going to be able to come over here and bring that. So I think overall, as mad as Oregon fans may be, I think it's a good pairing overall, and I think it's going to work out for both sides in the long run. But
yeah, for sure. I mean, it helps Oregon because it gives them a better platform to play their football on, TV wise, and argue about competition all we want or whatever. But at the end of the day, the Big Ten has more fans than the Pac-12 did. It's just a fact. More people wanted to watch the Big Ten. You can argue about the timing of it, but just the fact TV numbers show the Big Ten has far more fans than the Pac-12 did. And then in addition to that, it helps the Big Ten because the Big Ten continue to be that prestigious element. And to me, both North Carolina and Florida State do that same thing. Florida State and North Carolina both bring larger fan bases that are going to help the Big Ten. And at the end of the day, the Big Ten helps both of them by giving them a more stable platform. Let's end with this question because I just thought about it. And TSul, we'll start with you. I know you want everybody in, but if there could just be one team or two teams, I guess you have to pick two to kind of pair them together to bring in from anywhere but the SEC, who would be those two teams that you would want into the Big Ten?
JR, give me Miami and give me Colorado. We're taking our rivals back.
Do we rescind it if Deion's
I
not
don't want
there?
to deal with Deion that much.
Oh, we want to deal with Deion. Trust me.
Okay.
We want to deal with Deion. Imagine him getting smacked around in the Big Ten.
I mean, it would be fantastic. I just don't want to listen to him that much. I already have to listen to him enough.
Justin, who are your two?
UTEP. No, I'm just playing. I'm just trying to make it easier on us all. Just off the top of my head, without thinking, I just kind of like the combo that BSul came up with a little bit ago. Notre Dame is a team that I'd love to have in there in terms of just prestige, and just Notre Dame's always the odd one out in any conversation because they're just weird like that. And they're also the one that doesn't get a lot of respect because they typically, will drop a game here and there, and they don't have anybody else to back them outside of Notre Dame fans, So I think that pairing would work out. I think they fit what the Big Ten wants. They're a huge brand, a ton of money. And then, getting the team I kind of, more so than Florida State, TSul, I do like the Miami a little bit more just because rivalry there. Miami is, for what it's worth, I the only thing I think about Miami that the Big Ten won't like is just their reputation of not being, we know Miami's reputation. So I think that would be the only hindrance there. So just realistically, Florida State, maybe Notre Dame.
Yeah. BSul, what do you think?
Yeah, I think those two would be the most logical expansion teams, especially when you know that the ACC is going to be the next kind of conference to crumble there. And I think that's going to be the domino that once that starts and teams start bailing, that's when Notre Dame will be able to get out of that that basketball deal that they're locked into there. But how funny would it be? And just bear with me here. I know it's not going to happen, but basically, what if the Big Ten looked at North Carolina and they're like, sorry, you're asking too much. We're not going to do you any favors, this and that. So they boot them, they take Florida State, and then they're like,
we'll take NC State.
I was going to say, Iowa, you've been very loyal. We're going to bring in Iowa State. That way you've got your in-state rival. Just to throw salt in the wound, and then the North Carolina is stuck on the sinking ship.
Then the Big Ten would be like, oh, now we're stuck with Iowa State.
Now we've got Iowa State. Nobody wants them.
That's like asking your parents before the baseball game to get ice cream, and then your parents like, oh, you want ice cream? No, we're not going to the baseball game at all now. No, so you don't get to play baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, if I had to pick, Notre Dame would be in there, but I'm also kind of mad at Notre Dame because they're kind of uppity and stuff like that, and I don't really like that. So inside, I pick Notre Dame, but outwardly, I'm not going to pick them because I don't want to conform to that. But Florida State's definitely my top one, and then my other one. I know it sounds crazy, but I'd love to see Georgia Tech in the Big Ten. Fit down there a little bit more in the SEC. I think Georgia Tech has more fans than people realize. I know they're not a great school or football program, but they are a great school. They're a great academic school. But
I don't. Georgia Tech gave us Jeff Sims. I will reserve. I won't talk about them.
Don't you want the chance to beat them up a little bit
I'll
for
talk
that?
about them next year. I'm still upset.
Don't you want the chance to beat them up a little bit though for doing that?
I want no part of it. I want Jeff Sims gone. That's it.
All right. Let's get into our next one, or our final one here. Who is the next Big Ten coach that will go to the NFL? Let's go ahead and include the 4 teams coming in as well. So some common ones that you might hear here are Ryan Day, Lincoln Riley, maybe a Chip Kelly. Matt Rule was obviously in the NFL at one point. I don't know if we see him go back there again, but maybe. Who knows? I don't think so, but who knows? BSul, let's start with you. Out of the current coaches in the Big Ten, who do you think would be the most likely to go back to the NFL if given the opportunity?
I mean, I think the most obvious answer here for somebody taking that next step would be Lincoln Riley. I think everything that he's done since Oklahoma to USC, he's really kind of just been like, okay, I get you to a point, I'm going to take that next step. And so if USC had a different season this past year, everything lined up, Caleb Williams came back, you had that opportunity there. And again, they've fumbled down the stretch there that I don't think Lincoln Riley would even be the head coach at USC going into next season. He would have been that hot commodity leaving USC if they had had a better season. But honestly, somebody that I think is the next step into the NFL, aside from like an obvious answer like Lincoln Riley, is James Franklin from Penn State. That he's gotten to a point, the program's pretty much topped out to where I think he's going to be able to take it. And he's got proven success there that he wins games, even though he loses a couple during the season. He's shown, hey, I can get it there and I can build success and I can keep it there. And I think that's an opportunity that he will probably take a step to the NFL, maybe not after this season, but maybe the following one.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I didn't even think of I thought of James Franklin, but I didn't even think of that possibility for him to do that. So that's a good thought. TSul, what do you think?
Well, BSul took both of my picks here. You see, BSul, you were told you get one option. I picked 2, thinking, they might pick here. I'm going to stick with Franklin, though, with Penn State. And I do like this pick for him going to the NFL because he doesn't lose games that he's supposed to win. And there's something to be said about that. And I think NFL teams really like that. Like, yes, I understand he hasn't got over the hump, won the Big Ten or anything, but he takes care of business when he needs to take care of business. And, if Nebraska could do that, we'd be a completely different program right now.
Yeah.
That would be big. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, it's crazy that we all 3 had the same dang answer. I also was thinking James Franklin. However, there just to try to spearhead another conversation, maybe, you have some of these guys that, may not, we may be thinking like head coaching or whatever, but there's a couple of these guys, that the NFL could pluck as coordinators or passing game coordinators. There's a potential like a Dan Lanning could be pulled into some kind of defensive role, in the NFL. So I think James Franklin is probably the most likely scenario. I think Lincoln Riley, I think that's very possible just because Lincoln Riley seems to be the type of guy who just wants to go not from place to place, but just kind of like he just likes developing guys. He likes developing offense, developing quarterbacks. I could see that in the NFL, especially with the way that they like these styles of offenses now in the NFL. And they also like the young coaches, which is also why I think Dan Lanning could get pulled. They like the young, big-name coaches. But Ryan Day is another one up there. I know that he's not very, liked in the Ohio State fan base sometimes. But he came under the tutelage of Urban Meyer, and I think that Ryan Day, I think a lot of teams are, owners, GMs probably hold Ryan Day in a pretty high light. I think they see a lot of good in him, and I see a lot of good in him that can translate to the NFL as well. So you also got to remember that just because these guys can't necessarily get over the hump sometimes in college, that doesn't necessarily mean they won't be successful in the NFL. So if I was picking, and I think I could pick probably the most successful NFL coach, I honestly think Ryan Day would be a really good NFL coach. That's just me.
Yeah, I thought of this in terms of not only would they go as a head coach, but, could they go as a coordinator or something like that? And I think that Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley fit those molds the best as kind of what the NFL is looking for. Young, offensive-minded guy to come from there. So I feel like those are probably the next two most likely. I don't know what the deal is with Ryan Day, if he's just not been offered jobs or what, but he seems very content with staying around Ohio State, even though people treat him like dirt. But
my thing was, what if Ohio State doesn't keep him around? That was another thing too, that may lead to him going to the NFL. Yeah.
And he could totally go and be a quarterback's coach or something like that at the very least. So I think he'd find himself there if Ohio State did decide to part ways with him. But my other thought, one of you guys mentioned Dan Lanning. I feel like if Dan Lanning didn't leave for Alabama, I don't think he's leaving for the NFL. I think Dan Lanning's on this like mental mission, life mission, whatever it is, to make Oregon like a blue blood or whatever, which if I'm an Oregon fan, I'm excited about that because I do think Dan Lanning has a good future, but
he's 37 and he announced he was coming back, and then another role opened up and he was immediately speculated to leave there. Oregon fans are going to have their hands full dealing with this every offseason.
But if he remains true to what he's been saying, he wants to turn Oregon into like a destination place, then
we'll see it. We'll see. I believe.
We'll see what happens.
Money talks.
Money does talk.
NFL.
And Oregon has a lot of money with Phil Knight.
So does the NFL.
My final thought is, and I think he is probably the most likely one just because of some of the rumors and speculation around it, but it's Chip Kelly. I don't think Chip Kelly likes recruiting. I don't think Chip Kelly likes the college game as much. He wants to bring in players and, work them and have a good offense, but he doesn't really want to do the whole, like, let's be friends, let's be buddies and do this stuff. I mean, kind of saw the way he treated Dante Moore last year. Not saying he treated him bad, but, he wasn't like lovable with him like Jim Harbaugh was with J.J. McCarthy and stuff like that. So
Chip Kelly, the thing is, like, is he very like a hot commodity between that's another thing too. That's
like a coordinator, I think.
Yeah,
maybe like a coordinator. What do you think, BSul?
No, you see that?
TSul, what'd you say?
That's the Eagles shirt. No, the Eagles aren't going to touch him. I'm happy about that.
So I agree. I think Chip Kelly, and like you guys said, when I was talking first, I was thinking more in like that head coaching mold, which is why I was thinking Franklin. I agree. A lot of the Big Ten coaches, I think, would fit that mold of some type of a coordinator. And I agree. I think Chip Kelly probably is done with recruiting, so to speak, that he's just he wants to develop, he wants to be there, and he wants to just put guys out who are successful and can run his system without error. But I'm going to throw one more name out there, and this one's probably a little premature, but just hear me out. David Braun. And in some sort of a defensive role in the NFL, the guy has had success coaching defense at all three levels of college football. Now he's at the Power 5. He's a head coach for Northwestern and really, surprised everybody, shocked them all except for TSul last year. And so it's one of those things that does David Braun, if he has one, like maybe two more successful years at Northwestern, I don't think he's locked in Northwestern the way Pat Fitzgerald was. Whereas Fitzgerald was always rumored as like, oh, he's that next guy who's going to take the step, next guy that's going to take the step. And he was like, I'm never going to leave. I'm stuck here. Like, this is my alma mater. I want to be here. David Braun doesn't have that. This is just the first opportunity that somebody gave him to be a head coach, and was successful with it. So does he take this as a jumping off point to really, get to that next level of competition and be a defensive coordinator somewhere?
Kirk Ferentz. No, I'm just like 83 signed his contract.
You should have jumped already. No, I think that's a good thought. I didn't think of David Braun. You're right. That would be more down the line. But what were you saying, Justin?
No, that's a good point. Because like he said, Northwestern's one of those universities that they're probably not going to be able to pony up the bucks to keep him from the NFL. And with the way it is today, it's what have you done for me lately? If he comes out and springs together 2 good seasons in Northwestern when we were expecting him to be in the crapper, after Fitzgerald, then who knows? He could land a contract on his table.
Yeah, I agree. We do have a couple comments I want to get to from our friend Sonny here.
Oh,
Sonny
God.
said UNC. And then he also mentioned you in the other one. His best friend, Justin. He says, Justin has me convinced Nebraska is going 15-0 the next 2 seasons with 2 national championships. And that tells me the NFL is going to come calling again.
I think what I told him is we're going to go 15-0 combined over the next 2 seasons. No, 15 wins combined over the next season. Sorry, 15 wins combined.
I was like, how do you go 15-0 2 seasons?
No, yeah. I'm drinking the off-season Kool-Aid as I always do.
Me too. A little too much at this point, but the Rayola news really put me over the top. I was already riding high going into the off-season, and that just it's just been flowing over here.
Sonny's an Illinois fan, so he's mad because we didn't mention Bielema and the potential, coach is gone. Or Illinois anywhere in the episode at all because they're irrelevant.
No, he wasn't Bielema. I can't decide if people would like it or dislike it if we mention their coach's name in the NFL part. Because, for me, I'm like, okay, that'd be cool. Like, Ryan Day. Obviously, I don't want Ryan Day to leave because I like Ryan Day, unlike most of Ohio State fans. But I don't want him to leave. But I think that's good recognition that he's good, like a good coach and could go to the NFL. Yeah. But I could see somebody commenting on this video and being like, "You guys really think Chip Kelly's going to leave? You guys are stupid. UCLA, he loves UCLA. Yeah. Think about it." And it's like, okay.
Yeah. If you said that about Matt Rule, we'd probably do that. But Matt Rule went on McAfee's show and basically said he's a college guy, and he knows that now.
Yeah. Well, I think anybody would turn into a college guy if they went to the Panthers because. I think Bryce Young's trying to enter the transfer portal right now. Yeah, that too.
And he's like, "Oh, there's not one up here."
Sonny says, "I wonder if PJ would ever have that itch. He's into himself enough."
I
don't think the NFL is into PJ enough.
PJ his oar to his little rowboat has lost somewhere. Let's just leave him alone out there.
Minnesota wants him out.
Yeah, I would pay money to see the hard knocks of PJ Fleck in charge of an NFL team.
I would have loved to see him go to Michigan.
That would have been great. Fun.
I don't know how the odds are there for him. I mentioned him in one of my tweets, and I got so much pushback, and I was like, guys, he's in the odds.
It's Vegas. Put him in there.
I'm just telling you what the odds are. Don't get mad at me that I put him in there because, what am I supposed to do? Just take people out of the odds if I think it seems stupid?
Yeah. Then people are going to be like, well, PJ Fleck was in there.
Yeah, PJ Fleck's in the odds, dude. What are you putting?
Minnesota's going to be coming for you then.
All right. Well, we're losing viewers, so we might as well end it here, I guess. So thanks, guys, for coming on for this Nebraska edition of the Big Ten Huddle. Our Nebraska guys. But yeah, appreciate you all. Let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know. Certain segments like the conference expansion, do you guys like that kind of stuff? If you do, let us know. We'll do some more stuff on that here in the off season, but we're here in the off season with you. We're not going to stop. We're not going to do anything like that. We'll probably have one show a week and just go over news and notes and stuff like that. Toward August, July, we'll probably get into some conference predictions and stuff like that. But yeah, go ahead and let us know. We got one final thought before we head out of here from BSul. And I'll even say it, guys. I'll even say it. Go Big Red.
All right.
Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
See you guys.